we have invited the award winners from the architecture and the landscape architecture and the planning professions, the professionals, to come to Ball State to present their award-winning work. And I think it is very significant because I think this is another one of those activities that helps to, again, break down the barrier between the academy and the practice. I think for all of you that are in second and third year, and fifth year and fourth year actually, this is a very good opportunity to learn about firms here in the state of Indiana, to get to know some names and faces and projects, whether you're looking for an internship or whether you're looking for an entry-level employment. I think this is an excellent opportunity for you to be able to meet some of the outstanding practitioners and firms within our state. I'm going to introduce everybody first. The format is they have 15 minutes to present their projects, and then we're going to open it up and have a question and answer period, and I hope that you will all be able to engage in that. I might just mention that the awards program, which is under the auspices of AIA Indiana, is a biennial design awards program. There is an outside the state jury which is invited to review and to premiate the awards. And what we are seeing today are the award winners that were initially announced and presented at the Ohio Valley AIA convention held in Cincinnati in late October. The first presenter is going to be Steve Goffinet from the Scholler Corporation. Steve is a 1980 graduate of our college here, but also with him today, and I think actually operating the electronics, is Steve Golieski. Steve is a graduate of the University of Michigan. Interestingly enough, he is a second-generation architect with the firm. His father assumed the presidency of Scholler Incorporated after the younger Scholler retired in 1973. So the Golieskis have a long history with the firm. Our second speaker is going to be Gerard Skabensky. Gerard graduated from here in 1986, and he just related to me, interestingly enough, that he was an intern with Odell, McGuire, and Shook Corporation, and then returned to them upon graduation. Obviously, he is in his 15th year with the corporation and became a principal 3 years ago. Gerard, good to have you here. Our third speaker is probably the least unknown to you, or the most known, and that is Steve Risting from Ratio Architects. Steve is one of three principals of the firm. I think many of you know that he taught, along with Chris Boardman, a third-year design studio this past autumn. And actually, Steve will be presenting two projects on behalf of the firm. And lastly, when they arrive, we will have Drew White and Kevin Cooper from Axis Architecture Plus Interiors. And Kevin is attended Ball State University here, and I think many of you know and have already talked to me. They are one of, I'm sure, the smallest firm that will be presenting today, but one of the up-and-coming design firms. And again, I want to thank these professionals for taking time from busy schedules to be with us, to share their award-winning work, and we want to, on behalf of the College of Architecture and Planning, welcome you all. So Steve, it's your show.
Am I audible? Good. Thank you for the invitation, and it's nice to be back to Ball State again, although work over the past 10 or 11 years has brought me over here to the campus. I haven't had a chance to be in this building per se with any professional related things, but it's nice to be here to present this project that we were involved with over the past year, actually about 2.5 years, the renovation of St. Mary's Cathedral in Lafayette, Indiana. A little background before we go too far. I'm going to go to this podium, I think. Maybe not. Diocese of Lafayette is basically the middle northern third of Indiana. There are 5 dioceses total Roman Catholic diocese in the state of Indiana. Originally, there were two dioceses. The Fort Wayne Diocese comprised about the northern half, and the Diocese of Indianapolis the southern half. And then just after World War II, Fort Wayne was subdivided into Diocese of Lafayette, Gary, and also the original Fort Wayne case. St. Mary's originally started out as just a parish church. The original church was called St. Mary and Martha, built in 1948 in downtown Lafayette. And then in 1866, the parish grew and moved east of the downtown area, downtown being in this area, and built a new church, again, parish church, not a cathedral, next to an existing St. Ignatius Academy. Inside the church, this is one of the earliest photographs. What we see is the traditional American Gothic styling that was found in so many churches in the late 19th century. Okay. Again, after a number of years, there were some renovations that took place. This is a renovation in 1936. Most notably dealt with removing some frescoes that were in the apse area and reworking the sanctuary with a new decorative artistic scheme. After the Second World War, in 1946, St. Mary's Parish became St. Mary's Cathedral. And the most significant change at that time was the addition of the bishop's chair and the expansion a little bit of the sanctuary area. So there was a renovation in 1951 again that brought in a lot of wrought iron and some other marble elements to the sanctuary. In the early 1960s, Rome and the Catholic Church underwent what was called Vatican II, which was kind of an internal reformation decree for the Catholic Church, at which times several changes were dictated, and of which moving the altar from a high altar where the priest had its back to the congregation to turning it around, and a number of other things. So in '76 there was a renovation done that brought in some really beautiful orange carpet and some other pink and rose-colored and lime green decor. And the other significant thing was the bishop's chair that was over here was now moved to the apse area, the rear of the apse, where the high altar was, and it moved forward into a more liturgically correct location. This became a choir area, moving the music from the choir loft down to the sanctuary, and then also reducing a lot of the earlier ornate side altars to a minimal tabernacle area on this side, and then completely doing away with the side altar on the west side of the church. Our project basically got involved when the parish came to us and said, we want to paint the church. At that time, again, the last renovation was 1976. The church was in dire need of interior refurbishing in all aspects, both finishes as well as heating and cooling. And so we began a master plan for the campus here. This is a unique site in that it drops 50 feet from this corner to this corner. So there is a significant grade change for this particular building. The cathedral is dead center, aligning with the 11th Street. Downtown Lafayette has Columbia and South Street. These are both Highway 26 as it goes through town, east and west. And in the part of the master plan, we developed 3 phases. The first phase was to renovate the cathedral and to include a gathering lobby space or an expanded narthex. And the second phase was to add a social hall, and a third phase was to extend an academic wing, classroom wing, to the existing school. As it turns out, the parish overwhelmingly was in favor of combining phases 1 and 2 and including all that in their project. And so therefore what we ended up doing was to renovate the cathedral and then add both a social hall wing and a gathering space to the existing cathedral. Next. As you can see, the two existing floor plans are the existing floor plans to the finished floor plans side by side. Originally a 3 portico, very straightforward Gothic plan with the basilica, with the apse and the altar sanctuary area here, the nave, and then again the narthex portico entrance on the north side. Of particular note, you may see the baptismal area, baptistry, was tucked under a stair that went up to the loft, some confessionals. There were some real deficiencies in this plan. Most notably, again, this being a cathedral, there was not ample space in the sanctuary to accommodate all the priests in the Diocese of Lafayette at particular celebrations with the bishop. So consequently, these seats were relegated for the bishops, which separated them from the functions that were going on for particular diocesan functions. The new plan illustrates the modifications, the expansions of the sanctuary area to accommodate both choir and additional seating for all the priests in the diocese for diocesan functions, an expanded chancel area where keeping the bishop's chair at its current location as it was before. We removed the sacristy area, expanded it a little bit, and rebuilt it so that we could house mechanical equipment on the roof. The seating basically remained unchanged with the exception of this area. As you come in, the former baptistry has now been moved at a very prominent on-axis location as you come in the main door. The two side front doors were closed off, and we captured that space and created a reconciliation chapel here and a sacristy, a daily sacristy on this side. And then also you will note the wrapping around of the new gathering narthex space and the social hall, which created some very interesting challenges as to how we architecturally tied the new with the old. Next. And this is an illustration of the north elevation of the building. Here is the existing cathedral. What you see here rendered is all new. Again, pulling the front of the original building almost identically to what was there before to replicate that, actually reusing the stained glass transoms over the old doors and repeating identically the door styling and the entrances of the original church. Likewise, we selected a split-face masonry and a natural color to complement the cement stucco finish that was on the original cathedral, and then carrying that all through the addition of the social hall and then future meeting rooms on a lower floor below that. Transverse section through the church. The biggest thing to note here is, again, we removed the original, or the old sacristy, rebuilt it, and there we have the mechanical systems that were where we had to remove by way of tunneling under the existing cathedral to install ductwork for the new air conditioning heating system, but to do it discreetly so as not to disturb the internal architecture of the nave area. And then a transverse section showing how that was done. These were, again, the old crawl space was essentially this area, so this was tunneled out, leaving all the flooring in place, the structure, being very careful so as not to underpin the existing 135-year-old masonry structure. Next. And so side by side we see, again, going back, and these are a little dark. I apologize, projectors, we just couldn't brighten them up a little bit. Again, the old church, 1890s, before the steeple was added around 1895, the new church and the new addition where we, again, pulled the old out and added the new gathering space and the new social hall to the west. The interior, again, a little bit dark, but some of the next slides will be a little better. But before it became very dark, and it had become a very dark and unpleasant, dingy worship space, and so we went through and by completely renovating the interior of the church and adding new lighting, both in uplighting and accent lighting, we completely changed the character of the space by literally with a new painting scheme and adding color to places where pastels were. We now had rich blues and reds on the marble in the sanctuary, and went to a whole palette of richer colors and materials. And a view from the choir loft shows, again, the overall expansion of the sanctuary area and some of the decorative work that went on in that area. And again, notably the addition of uplighting at the tops of all the columns to highlight the vault structure, the plaster vault structure. Next. Again, looking towards the rear and the choir loft area, rebuilt the organ completely, and then you see the baptismal area, and then the old exits become niches for statuary on either side. Side aisle, the old Gothic lanterns that were in the main aisle were moved to the side aisle and centered up, creating a more vertical space, and then also opening up the volume or the proportions of the center aisle. The addition of a precast fiberglass gypsum sconce to the tops of all these columns. The original columns ended right about there. This portion is new to hide or conceal the uplighting that helps accentuate the vault structure. In the sanctuary, again, in detail, we took a very literal, almost artist studio approach to how we handled the historical replication of a new altar out of Balthazar marble. A French red marble was selected for the flooring of the sanctuary, again bringing in some very rich, very expensive materials that are synonymous with what you would normally find in a cathedral, and then carry that through to the pulpit and some of the other elements, the altar for the tabernacle, and then carrying the Botticino marble into the step area of the chancel and the bishop's area. A close-up of the altar, again, gets into some of the historical detailing, the Gothic carvings that were done, and at this top is one solid piece about 11 inches thick. It probably weighs almost 2 tons. One piece of marble came all the way from Italy. All the carvings were done in Italy. And on the rear wall, in the chancel area, is a new canvas paintings of the 11 apostles, which were 12 minus Judas at the time of the risen Christ, and then the seal of the bishop and the chancel area. More of the same, the sanctuary area. Over here is where the tabernacle was moved in keeping with liturgical changes to create a chapel for the tabernacle itself. Next. And then as you come in, again, going back to the baptistry and the baptismal font, to symbolically place this on axis as you enter the church. You literally enter through the sacrament of baptism. And then basically this is a little better shot of the color scheme of the interior of the church. Removed the old Stations of the Cross frames, left the stations which were 1890s vintage, and replaced those with new mahogany frames in a Gothic styling. Some of the detailing on the baptismal font is that we borrowed or took and repeated the old communion railing, and we salvaged it and then reworked it and made a railing around the font itself. Again, going with the same marbles that you find on the sanctuary. And some detailing showing a marble mosaic on the pool, and then the water spills down these sluices, and some of the detailing of the wrought iron railing. Inside the small chapel, again, this is just off the sanctuary. You see the altar here looking out into the nave. We created a Eucharistic chapel for private prayer. Again, this is the tabernacle that can be accessed from the front or the rear. There is a door to the right for 24-hour access that would allow the rest of the church to be closed off. Some of the detailing added an accessibility ramp to allow anyone and everyone accessibility to the sanctuary area or to the chapel. And here you see it with the wrought iron gates open, and went and made a new artwork for 3 sides of the existing tabernacle, castings that are, again, iconography that matches the old artwork that was on the front of the tabernacle. And as you enter the church, this is the original doors to the church We replicated, again, the wood doors that were there before, removed the transom and pulled it to the new exterior door. This is the gathering space as you come into the church itself. And that would be standing here looking that way. And as you move forward or to the west, this is the gathering lobby. You see the original facade of the original church. The old doors we left in place but fixed those, decoratively painted those to remind everyone of what the original church was. This is the steeple structure, and then you see the new split-face masonry that was carried inside the space to complement, again, the masonry of the original church. And you move to the west into the social hall, which was the area that was added to the west. It's a two-story structure. We're on the upper floor where the social hall dining area is, with windows to the west and to the north that look out onto downtown Lafayette. And being situated on the side of the hill, it's very dramatic in terms of the views. Created indirect lighting with a vaulted ceiling of about 20 foot in height, and a kind of a trellis structure above that to conceal that lighting that also incorporates speakers and sound system. And as you come out the main entrance, this is the new front doors. We had to replace all the existing concrete steps and limestone balustrade. Actually, we replaced the concrete but preserved and renovated the limestone balustrade and then extended it up to create a balcony at the top. But the concrete was in such bad shape we had to replace it. And again, this is fine. This is an illustration, again, of the finished cathedral, showing the color matching that we took great pains to do. Again, this is split-face masonry, and this is a stucco applied over an original red brick building that was put on back in the 1920s when numerous leaks were coming through the old soft brick. And so this stucco facade is not original. It's basically was added in the 20th century, but again, replicating the old front of the building and pulling it forward as part of the new work and trying to complement it as much as possible. And having went through that as quickly as I hope I could, this is the view from the south as you come into the new gathering space here, and the lobby, the social hall is to the west. And with that, I will conclude our presentation and turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Today it's my pleasure to present to you a two-time award-winning project for us, the Lilly and Martin Halls at University of Indianapolis. We won the Honor Award for AIA Indiana, and we won a Merit Award at AIA Indianapolis. When Einstein was postulating his theory of relativity, science needs and science education facilities at that time were pretty barren. There weren't a lot of requirements at that time. Today's science facilities and the demands put on by university professors are really great, and in order to do that, facilities need to be updated. Advances in discoveries over the last several decades have acted as a catalyst for continuous change in the scope, complexity, technology, implementation, and environmental concerns. With change occurring at increasing velocity, cutting-edge universities know that science facilities have no choice but to perform on several different yet interdependent levels. Understanding this challenge, the University of Indianapolis had very clear goals in mind in the programming and design of a new science building. That was Martin Hall and Lilly Hall. Lilly Hall had been an existing facility as a science hall, originally started with money from Eli Lilly himself. To address their goals, the University of Indianapolis selected Odell, McGuire & Shook to provide full-service architectural and engineering planning and design. The remote's not working, so they'll have to... Okay, well, that worked out great. It takes a team, and that team included the entire OMS team, starting with our educational planning group, and I'll kind of give you some of this background for those of you that don't know who we are or what we do. We are as I indicated, we're a planning and full-service architectural design firm. including educational planning, architecture, mechanical structure, plumbing, and electrical engineering, landscape architecture, interior design, commissioning, where we initialize new buildings and walk owners through their brand new facilities and get them and make sure their maintenance people know how to run the facility so you don't get complaints down the road that something doesn't work. It's better to find out as soon as you can before the contractor walks off the site that the facility is actually operating to specification. And last but not least, field services as well as extended services. We are an 80-person architectural engineering firm. Our main office is located on the north side of Indianapolis. We also have an office in Bloomington on Indiana Highway 37. Our relationship with the university started in 1990. We got hired to update a master plan. Their original master plan, the college, dates back to the early 20s. At that time, in their treatise papers for the university, it indicated that they always wanted a green, pedestrian-friendly campus. It's a little hard to see in that 1990 picture, but smack dab in the center of the university was a huge parking lot. About scale-wise, about the same size as to the south of the Cap. And as I stated, in 1991, we were brought on board to analyze the campus and provide them with an updated master plan. Basically, what we did in that master plan was to get them back to where they were in 1921, which was to create this green-friendly pedestrian atmosphere. They'd had a very good success rate with students once they got on campus, but their problem was getting students there because the campus was just not very attractive. So as much as it is a growing university, it was also a marketing effort to make the college more likable to students who were looking at it through internet web-based viewers, looking at pictures of the campus, coming and visit. It was just a terrible situation with parking in the dead center of campus. So our goal was to move all of the parking to the periphery of the campus, and in the center of that create Smith Mall, which you see in that shot in the center of campus. Includes a water feature that flows all winter long, as well as a couple fountains, and then green space for just students to have fun, as well as 4 sculpture gardens at the 4 corners of the quad. From that, we went on to, I'm sorry, go ahead to the next slide. It also shows some of the features, the fountain. This is the reflecting pool going back towards Lilly Hall with the observatory roof on the top of that, and railings that were put in an outdoor amphitheater, and the 4 sculpture gardens are not shown in this picture. The goals the university defined in the project included all of these items, but probably the most important 3 items that aren't listed up there was, one, they wanted the professor's offices centrally located. The university had been growing, and they'd basically been taking whatever space they could find on campus, throwing up some gypboard, and creating some small offices for professors. So it wasn't uncommon that a nursing student or a science student might have professor's office on the complete opposite end of the campus. Second to that was, while we were going to renovate the entire building of Lilly Hall, top to bottom, every piece of wire piping was stripped out of the building, they had to maintain class in the building. They had no other large teaching spaces on campus, and so science facilities had to be renovated one facility at a time so that we could work through and renovate the entire building. And then lastly, provide facilities that were equal to, if not better than, those that you'd find at other major universities in the state. Due to the complex demands of the programming and things like that, we brought on Payette Associates out of Boston to help with programming, given their expertise in doing cutting edge, not only science facilities for a lot of major schools along the East Coast, but also for their work with major chemical and industrial firms. Other team members included Lynch Harrison and Brumlevy, who provided structural engineering, and last but not least, Worcester Construction, who helped by being a very good contractor. It's easy to end up with a good project, but it's not so easy if you have a bad contractor. And Worcester was really, really, really helpful in working through the phasing of the project, which I'll touch on in a little bit. There was an early recognition in the programming process that the sciences had related needs for laboratory space, which could accommodate often volatile, flammable, and toxic materials. Previous building consisted of unit ventilators that basically just recirculated the air in the room, and the old fume hoods and things like that they had in place were just outdated and antiquated given the current scheme of the buildings. You can go ahead to the next slide. At the same time, other programs required large loft-like teaching spaces where groups of people could work together with large pieces of equipment, apparatus, and that was associated with the nursing program. By grouping the departments with similar needs together, the design of the new facility and the existing facility renovations provided an economy of systems, interdisciplinary teaching capabilities, and flexibility for future changes. To the left there with the barrel vaulted roof is the new Martin Hall. That is Martin Hall there, and this is the edge of Lilly Hall with the existing observatory. And it also includes a connecting corridor that joins the two buildings together. This is an early design model to help express to the client that we could make the two buildings fit with the rest of the architecture on the campus, which I believe Steve Risting has some knowledge of with the Crystal DeHaan facility. The facility has a lot of red brick, limestone detailing throughout all of their buildings. Lilly Hall, as you can see, is a 4-story building, part of that being subterranean. Martin Hall was a 3-story building, and the university was a bit concerned about whether or not it would look right, a 3-story and 4-story. So as an early design model, we created it to show them that they could actually get these two things to work out. The large loft-like spaces occur in Martin Hall. Originally, they had envisioned, the university had envisioned putting the sciences in the new building, so that all could be completed prior to having to vacate the other rooms to do the renovation. But as it turned out, the large spaces that were needed for the nursing program, physical therapy, and occupational therapy actually had larger space needs than what the science required. And we were able to, in most cases, expand the science labs within the existing building by repartitioning the interior of the building to take advantage of the existing space that was in there. Go ahead to the floor plan. As a part of developing the building, the site's fairly tight. By creating a second L-shaped building, we not only were able to create something kind of dynamic, a dynamic space to walk through, but also allowed natural light to get in all the spaces. The connecting walkway enables the students from the nursing, physical therapy, and occupational therapy programs to easily mix in with math and chemistry, sciences, gross anatomy labs. We also incorporated a new boiler facility that includes all the heating and cooling piping that takes care of not only the existing Lilly Science Hall, but then has buried mains that go across into the lower level of Martin Hall. Go ahead. Martin Hall, it's about 46,000 square feet, as well, and go ahead and click one more time. I think it's about 63,000 square feet. Both projects together were about $9 million, which in square footage terms works out as about $60 a square foot for building renovation costs for Lilly Hall, and a surprising $88 a square foot for Martin Hall. So they're very economical buildings. By no means are they huge buildings, but they do fit very well on campus. Okay. As the floor plan kind of pops up here, we can kind of scroll through. There's 3 floor plans. Probably, as I indicated, the most challenging aspect of the project was the phasing. Again, we had to renovate the entire Lilly Hall, kind of one space at a time. To do that, we had 9 major phases of the project with about 4 or 5 kind of smaller sub-phases within there. Each space had to be renovated, maintained, had to be renovated and completed, ready for the owner to move in before we could start work in the next adjacent lab space. Obviously, the university, from their aspect, when they took it over, they wanted all the punch lists complete and all the items in the building completed. And trying to phase that, again, you're taking a building that, for a point of reference, the floor-to-floor height in the building was only 11 foot 4 inches, was a concrete frame, and the concrete frame structure took up about 18 or so inches out of the height of the building. And here we are trying to bring in forced air systems, new piping, new domestic water, new heating piping, new chilled water piping, domestic water, deionized water, lab water, distilled water to all the various labs, all the same time through the same corridors that have to maintain the existing systems because we can't take any part of the building down. So we were able to achieve that by creating some vertical chases through the building. Those new chases brought the new services up through the building and enabled us to slowly kind of decommission each of the existing labs and renovate them one at a time. Go ahead to the next. As I indicated, these are some early renderings. I've actually seen some work that our some Ball State graduates that we have that have been working with us for a couple of years now have been developed most of these elevations and floor plans. And my kudos to the university for encouraging the 3D design and AutoCAD skills. The buildings, again, as I indicated earlier, feature limestone banding, base and coping, as well as lintels to match the existing architecture that's on the campus with large punched windows. The style of the windows and things like that is pretty common and typical of most of the other buildings on the campus. This slide shows the barrel vaulted roof over the mechanical space with the little trapezoidal protrusion of the elevator shaft. Again, something to impart some design to the building and kind of tie the top element of the building to the adjacent Lilly Hall that had the observatory roof on it. I think there's just a couple of other slides. That's the elevation facing Smith Mall to the south. The glass stair towers enable you to, as you're walking up and down through the stairs, instead of being in this enclosed, solid masonry, you're able to get really nice views out into Smith Mall and the dormitories to the north of the site. That's the main entrance looking east from a new parking lot that was put in south of their library facility. Next slide. And that's the finished building. So the central stair that connects all floors of the building really creates a real neat dynamic through there with the natural light flooding through there and shadows that move through during the day. Student lounge, the University of Indianapolis has a very high, and especially in their, again, Martin Hall was a nursing facility, physical therapy and occupational therapy. They have graduate programs in the physical therapy and occupational therapy, and because of those graduate programs, they have a lot of commuter students that come in, they're working as professionals to come and get graduate degree. So they need a place to come and kind of land and be able to eat lunch, and this is a student lounge space that enables them to do that. And then in the corridors of the building, we also provided lockers where students can rent locker space so they don't have to lug all their stuff back and forth. This is a physical therapy, occupational therapy lab. Includes work tables where the students learn to make casts for hands or splints, repetitive stress injury and things like that. That's what they're teaching them to work through. This is a seminar lecture lab that's got a stepped platform, and what you don't see in that, because it's hidden, is projection screens, video projectors enable them to tie this in, just similar to Ball State, with a university network and show things either from the local area network here as well as wide area network using other colleges. And this is a nursing lab on the third floor of the building. Those are actually dummies laying on beds, and they teach, I can't think of the word, they teach anything that has to do with nursing, with addressing patients, taking care of patients as part of their nursing program, and then includes an instructional area where they can do some of the just classroom type teaching and then move over and actually practice on dummies. This is a tiny professor's office. I think maybe some of our professors here might recognize the size of some of those offices. They're about 90 square feet. Barely enough room for a professor to get in there and change his mind. We worked through several schemes trying to increase the size of the offices, but the university felt that 90 square feet was plenty, and that's what they got. So there's about, I believe there's 45 offices in Martin Hall and 23 offices in Lilly Hall to accommodate all the professors. And lastly, this is our last shot of the new Martin Hall and the connecting corridor taken from Smith Mall. And that's it. Thank you.
First of all, that good design can happen in the Midwest or in Indiana by Indiana firms. We often compete with national firms, East Coast firms. We lose a lot of students going out to the East Coast, and while I'll be the first to encourage you in order to explore working as an internship.
Mics aren't working here.
Got it?
Yeah. Where do we hook you up to?
Here and here.
There we go.
There. Can you hear me now? Okay. Two things I want to emphasize again is that good design can be created in Indiana. And second of all is that design excellence or good design comes in a variety of forms and different project types. That the good design can be created in Indiana or in the Midwest, as I was saying, is I'll be the first in order to encourage many of you to look at graduate schools on the East Coast, on the West Coast, or to go out there for internship. But the opportunity to do good design is here. Many people have asked me why I left Boston after being out there for 5 years to come back to the Midwest. Well, my first reason is that I could afford a home and a place to raise a family, and I'm from the Midwest originally. The second reason is there was a lot more opportunity in order to be a designer on projects, and there is opportunity to do good design here. I'm going to be a little bit presumptuous in talking about ratio architects in that we really are committed in terms of design excellence. And in terms of the AIA Indiana Biennial Awards, since 1992, we have been fortunate to have a variety of projects that have been selected for that award. To run through those fast, we'll see if we can click through this, is in 1992, 120 Monument Circle, which is the Anthem corporate headquarters on Monument Circle, was one of the first projects that was awarded. In 1994, we had two projects that were awarded at the University of Indianapolis, where Martin Hall is located. It is the Crystal DeHaan Fine Arts Center. On the interior is then a large concert hall for that. And also in the same year, we did another large corporate headquarters downtown Indianapolis, Farm Bureau Insurance, in which we took an old factory building and converted it into a corporate headquarters, and then created an atrium where there wasn't not one before, and really created a corporate image inside to it. 1996, Hamilton County Courthouse. This was a historic preservation project in which we were simply doing the exterior renovation using old photographs in order to restore it back to its grandeur that it once had been before to it. Detail of the cupola. A lot of the roof, the cupola, was all missing when we actually did the restoration of that project. In 1998, the Jewish Community Center in Indianapolis, which was a renovation and addition of an existing building, looking at the symbolism of the Jewish community and providing a recreational facility for them, focuses much on the interior spaces as well on all of our projects. A year ago, the year 2000, again, we were fortunate to be selected for 2 awards, MS Communications on Monument Circle, which is their world headquarters with radio station, corporate headquarters, and all to it, large atrium space, public gathering on the inside. And the second project was at Indiana University, the Radio and Television Center down there, which was an addition to an existing building along an arboretum, and again, focus on the exterior and the interior on it. So I think you can see One Ratio's commitment to design excellence, but also that we look at a variety of different projects, and that's what you've seen here today, as well as from the restoration or the large or the small scales. Uniquely, the first project which was selected is the Wishart Garage Hospital. Most will say that a parking garage really doesn't have a lot of opportunity for design, but when you start to focus on the details, on the facade, and you look at it in terms of what our goal was here, was to create a gateway for the Wishart Hospital. We also did the street along here to it. There is an opportunity to do something fairly unique for it. The next slide is just showing the simplicity of what the plan is. You can see the garage on the right-hand side there. Actually, I think these are all backwards, but again, you can get the same idea to what the design intents are. We had uniquely 3 different type of clients. A lot of times people will say that it takes a great client in order to have great architecture. Here we actually had kind of an autonomous institutional client in which there was a university or an institutional architect overseeing it. We really did not meet with the hospital heads, but we also had to deal with regulations of a historic commission in terms of looking at what the design was. So the design had to be more than simply a concrete garage structure or the cheapest type of thing, and also is kind of the front door to IUPUI in Indianapolis. And so the University Architects of Indiana University also had a say in terms of what the design was. Again, our client was Wishart Hospital, but we also knew that we could be rejected by these 2 other agencies. The next is simply looking at the plan of what a garage is, fairly straightforward. But this happened to be at this time when ADA was also just coming into effect, in which they started to look at parking spaces that needed to have a walkway in front of it. Most garages, which one doesn't think a lot about, you simply go to the elevator up in the upper left-hand corner there and walk across. What we wanted to create, as you see at the top of the plan, is a walkway. There's a lot of handicapped spaces within a medical garage, and so we wanted to emphasize that. To the architecture, looking at the facades, is the first idea was that it didn't look, first of all, like a garage, or they wanted it to look more like a laboratory building. And so then we studied it in terms of the brick and the limestone and some of the details that go with it. Next slide. Looking more closely at some of the details, again, you can see kind of the detailing of the punched windows. While there is no glass within the windows, they still have that sense of facade. Also, in the next slide, I believe, is that it is an underground garage for 2 levels. And so there starts to become exhaust vents. And again, taking the mundane mechanical elements, these little projections that start to come out, we started to pay attention to what that detail was, and it became a series of walls that broke up the facade. The next detail just looks at the ends of it. It again started to look at what some of the details. And then the next even looks at the brickwork. And again, the attention to the brickwork, the ins and outs of what the roll-lock coursing was, picking up on some of the character of some of the existing buildings. But even in a large-scale project like this, the attention to detail is what really makes design excellence within a project. Going around again, just looking at where the details are here. to the left are the openings, which are kind of looking from a distance as a regular building, but at the same time we still wanted to reveal that the building type was a garage. And so you see the light fixtures on the top, which then emphasize that it is parking structure, or the slot in between, which starts to reveal the inner workings of the garage in between there. The detail on the next slide will show how we started to look at what the details were happening along there. Is we used stainless steel framing, glass block, and even kind of the metal grating for security on the bottom level. Again, it's that attention to detail that we put throughout the project. As we go around to look at some of the other facades, the kind of the skewed piece on the corner actually relates to some of the context of the other buildings that you would have seen on the site plan through there. The large mechanical exhaust for the emergency generator down below there, and kind of the elevators and the stairway in well. You go to the next image, I think we go to the interior. Go one more. Even on the inside, the attention to the stairway in terms of how it wraps up and creating a little bit of volume. Again, a very mundane building type traditionally, but the attention to detail can really bring design excellence to it. The next slide is actually there's a tunnel connection under the road that connects the hospital and the garage. And along this long tunnel, again, we looked at how to create a series of nodes, and at those nodes, we brought the glass block down to it. Between the glass block row courses are actually fiber optics, and so that you can start to bring lighting down there and actually change the color of lighting, so it becomes kind of an interesting sequence as one walks along there. But the main feature of the garage is back to that walkway, and that walkway again pulls off the details that we talked about within the windows. That's the cantilevered portion, which allows you then to get to the elevator, and it's composed, if you go to the next slide, of the stainless steel frames, glass block, louvers, and Lexan glazing. It's all exterior, but again, it starts to be some of the detail that one can provide in this type of project. I think the final slide, again, more of the detail of what we have there, looking closer at it, and then also thinking about the projects, not only during the day, but how they project in the evening. So again, the variety of projects that we provide there. The second project that won an award this year is Brown County Library. When we were selected for that project, we had just completed a library in another county that was very well received. We don't do a lot of libraries, but we try to do nice design in terms of it. We competed with a lot of the firms that were experts in terms of doing libraries. They liked our approach because we talked about what the design was. Again, they were looking for a library that wasn't necessarily a landmark building, a high design building, but that something that was indicative of who they were for their community. Nashville, Indiana, where this is located, again, kind of in the center of Brown County, kind of the fall New England of Indiana, has a lot of tourists coming. They did not want this as a tourist destination. They wanted it to fit within the site. The site that was selected, and we went through quite a bit of site selection, was actually a very steeply sloping site. On the upper left-hand corner was actually about 20 feet higher than the lower portion of where the parking lot, and the parking lot continues on going down the site. One of the things we looked at was the history of Brown County. At the turn of the century, many of the artists from Chicago came down to here, and so we really wanted to look at what the artist type of studios were and what the type of light was, as well as the library had a wonderful collection of Brown County artists in order to display within. This gulch that was coming down through here actually had a few of the studios that were close to it. One of the things that really inspired us in terms of where we were looking at is we looked at the Brown County stone, the material, looked at a lot of the wood in terms of what was indigenous to the area, but also the TC steel home, and we looked at it carefully, and we saw the slight skew to it in terms of where the studio and the home itself was, highly influenced by that, as well as we looked at the park structures in terms of what was down in Brown County. And the image of it, the first image you'll see, and it's actually a bi-level library. This plan is the upper level. The main level coming into it is really kind of more subdued in terms of its design. It's more based upon the park structure and the exposure of the wood, and then bringing the Brown County stone into it. We used carved stone in order to put the logos into it and give a little bit of detail for what we have. But the next slide will look over to the right a little bit more. And here's where you see the drop in the site. Here's where you start to see the skew and where the planning is. And at that point, it becomes less of a park structure and becomes more of a pavilion and more based upon the TC steel house than just the park structures themselves to it. The attention to detail with the pilasters looking at the windows. On the upper level, which is the main library, and we're on top of a hill, is it tried to create wonderful vistas out into the countryside in order to enjoy the scenery of Brown County and to bring you back into it. Coming inside, and this is actually the main entrance from the parking lot, is there's a grand stairway about 6 feet wide that brings you up from the lower level where there's also meeting halls, but coming up to there is this stairway in which we've got local artists in order to collaborate with us so that we have the collaboration of art and architecture. We also brought some of the stone inside with the elevator off to the right. As you go up the stairs and look into the library itself, and again, it's a one-story library. If we get to the next slide. Again, you'll see what library is, or a lot of libraries are very open in terms of the construction. Security is a very big issue. They're also starting to change a little bit to more computers versus just the books. But what we tried to do, again, with a very limited budget on this, is to create a wood structure as the main structure and feel for it. We're giving it kind of, again, that Brown County feel on the inside, and then looked at simpler materials for the rest of it. Off to the left-hand side, if we go to the next slide, is the children's area. This was a little skewed area that popped out, which became all windows, so that when the children are playing, they feel like they're as much engaged into the site. You can kind of look back and see the building itself. The next slide will look in terms of the kind of the center of the library, in which you have the large clear story windows that brings natural light into it and still controls the amount of lighting that we have in there and creates kind of a lounge area. And then finally, in terms of the image, we came back to kind of the homey in. If we go to the last slide here, is the ingle nook or the fireplace. Using foundation stones from old bridge trestles found in the area, splitting that stone, and then using that in order to create the fireplace. And I think you can see then the opening, and then you can look out into Brown and really get a nice feel to it.
Thanks a lot for inviting us, Kevin Cooper and myself, to be here today. Axis won 2 awards this year, and we've only brought information about one of those, and it's the Wheeler Arts Community Loft Building. Next. The Wheeler Arts project probably for us was, when it first came to the office, we didn't know whether to be excited or to start running. The client came to us and said, we have a great way for you guys to get involved with our community. Can you do some free sketches and free space plans for us? And as usual, most of our projects start out that way, and we thought, why not? We'll go ahead and give it a try. Sometimes don't start out to be these wonderful commissions, but instead start out to be, I guess, standard commissions. The building was considered a white elephant by Mayor Goldsmith, and he tried to have the building torn down, but I think Bill Taft, who was with SEND, a community development corporation in Fountain Square, decided that he wanted to save the building. The community development corporation decided to buy it. It is a 60,000 square foot building that was at one time in the early 1900s used for carburetor manufacturing. The building evolved. It started in 1919, and up till about 1940, different pieces were added onto it. Most of the structures are concrete frame with brick exterior, wood flooring, very, I guess you'd say, simple with its materials, but in our opinion, very exciting. We thought it would be important, too, to talk about the context for the arts, for the Wheeler Arts Building. It rests in a residential neighborhood known as Fountain Square. Bud's Supermarket, lots of parking. I don't know if I'd use the word blighted, but probably an urban environment that hasn't been treated as it hasn't been treated specially, I guess is a nice way of putting it. A new fire station was built, not fire station, police station was built, I think in the early 90s. Beyond that, the area was in pretty bad shape. Our project is a concrete frame building built in 1919. It was a brick addition that has sawtooth components at the top, built in the 30s. And then in the 40s, there's a boiler house piece behind that structure. Thanks. This is kind of a blow-up of, I can't even see it very well, sorry. This was our existing fabric to work with. This is the building, the 1919 building, concrete frame. But for us, I think all of you can probably start to see too, there's beauty in even this image. We were excited about the manipulation of how these windows had all been closed in differently. This is a nice piece that we really liked. I think for us, this project became a dig, an architectural and archaeological dig, as Kevin calls it. We started digging around and found lots of beauty. Next. Was their loading dock component, which interestingly enough is the loading dock now too. We kind of restored that. The program asks for 36 live-work artist studios, and these are subsidized housing studios. It's a new, kind of a new type for Indianapolis. As a result of the Ferris building closing down in Indianapolis, there were lots of artists that were told to leave the Ferris building. At the Ferris building, there was a series of studios that some artists lived in illegally. And because of that, Lilly bought the Ferris property, and they are now converting it into to office space for their use. The artists had nowhere to go. And another project close to this project, the Murphy Arts Building, was being restored in conjunction with the Wheeler Arts Building and started to create synergy for the community. The program also included, go ahead, that's fine, included, the University of Indianapolis has collaborated with SEND, and in this building there's theater space, painting studio space, office space for professors. There's also the Writers Center of Indiana has space in the building. The other parts of the program are a dining component, and then intertwined throughout the building are gallery spaces for each of the artists to use. It is appropriate for them to sell their products, show the way they work in their open house functions. Again, as an extension of the Ferris building, there were open houses that happened there 3 or 4 times a year. They wanted to continue that way of doing things. Again, existing fabrics that you can see, windows, concrete frame, the wood flooring from the manufacturing was very exciting for us. Next. I think when Kevin and I walked through the space, the first thing that we said to ourselves was that putting up walls and creating the units and creating the spaces that we're talking about may in fact cover up the beauty of the building. So it was very important for us not to do that. And in effect, we wanted the new interior architecture to coexist with the frame that was there. Properly color-coded floor plan. This is the entry level, which kind of gives you an idea of how the units were wrapped on the exterior. In a sense, they weren't just placed on the exterior wall. Obviously, you need light to come into the spaces, but we wanted the units to create additional spaces, adjacent spaces that could be used for the shows that I talked about earlier. The green kind of shows University of Indianapolis space, which does center itself about the plan, and then the theater space is located in the old loading dock portion of the building. Vaults, existing vaults that stayed in place and act as storage for this unit. You also will notice that because we had a very limited budget, $50 a square foot, that's both for the interior and exterior renovation, it really forced us into a battle with ourselves and also with the project. Our exterior renovations were quite extensive, a new window package, complete renovation of the concrete and the brick masonry, new coping, new windows. All those things, in a sense, stole money away from the fun interior architecture. So that kind of pushed us into creating interior cores within the units that were stacked back to back and also upon each other from first to second floor. Interestingly enough, though, even though the placements are similar, some are slightly rotated, because of the existing fabric that the spaces had, because of structure, because of rods that might be projecting down to support the old manufacturing uses, there are also kind of weird structural components that we don't know what they were used for. Because those are different in each unit, it makes each unit its own experience. And that was really important to us, too. Next. The second floor is more dense in terms of units, less public spaces. There are still gathering spaces and corridor spaces that interconnect the units. There is a two-story atrium space that we discovered in our architectural dig that was covered up by previous users. The last user of the space actually made the pellets that you see for shipping products. So they filled in the atrium space, another part of our dig. We were also, by using the rehabilitation code and in meeting with the state historic preservation characters, we were told to maintain existing stairways, elevators, that you'll see there and there. And also in the second floor, this was the old office portion of the manufacturing. So in their opinion, those were historical components that had remained, and the integrity of those need to stay in. So it may sound like that those are rules that are hard to maintain, but for us it gave us more opportunity. Section drawing through the atrium space, the cores, the compression of the cores themselves allow for differing volumes of spaces within the units, which were important to us too. And then these were kind of studies of the core itself. I keep bringing up the core. When you think about the units themselves, they're about 900 square feet on average. They rent for about $325 a month. And we did lots of research, went to Chicago, also collaborated with live-work developers who did projects in Minneapolis, Oakland, and Los Angeles. The thing that we learned by doing that research was that it was very important for us to make sure that the units were not or didn't feel like low-income or subsidized housing. So I think you'll see that we accomplished that. The project really is about a very, very standard exterior renovation that's been mixed with, I think, a challenging interior architecture project. Another long section. If you recall from the context photograph that we showed, there's the sawtooth units, which have wonderful northern light that filtered down into those units on the second floor. And if you recall back from the floor plan on the second floor, we actually do have units that are inboard that don't have direct exterior light, but their light actually comes through those spaces. There's also a section through the theater space, very standard. Next. Exterior perspective. The renovation window package, very standard. We got permission from David Duval with the state that we could start to, I guess you'd say, fool around a little bit with the loading dock and there's a handicap ramp too that provides access to that end. This is another entrance to the building that we restored back to its original condition. Various studies on the core. This is the loading dock entrance. The atrium space that we found. We created a bridge to connect the 1919 building with the 1940 building. You can see there's the concrete framing, there's structural steel. We ran out of money in our budget, so we weren't able to kind of uncover all of the old skylight that was above the atrium. So instead, there are two triangular patches of the skylight that have been restored, allowing light to come into the space. The bridge is steel plates, One of the instructions that we had on the construction documents for the plates are that we wanted to make sure that the fabricator, we gave them one pattern layout for the plates and then told him to develop the rest. So he enjoyed that a lot. Next. This is the football space, and it's a breakout space for the theater. It also is one of the primary gallery spaces too, but you can see the existing wood flooring, concrete that runs through. Obviously, heavier traffic components ran through that than the existing manufacturing. There's also some plywood inserts that we've inserted. Steel base, very simple, and then a 3/4 inch thick plywood ceiling. One of the units, this is Tarantula Man's unit. There's probably, I think there are 82 tarantulas there right now. It's very scary when you visit, but he's a painter, and his unit actually has one of the rotated cores. All the ductwork is exposed. This is his little unit, mechanical unit, and hot water heater. There are storage areas above the core that you can't see very well in this image, but some of the artists are sleeping. They're not supposed to, but they're sleeping above the core. Behind the core is a very, very large closet storage space. All the artists have lots of things to store beyond their clothes, including their products that they use to make their goods. So that was important to us. And you can see how great the floors turned out. This was just 2 rounds of sanding and 2 coats of polyurethane. It's kind of hard to tell from this image, but this is one of the sawtooth units. We also placed these very long vertical openings into each side of this unit to provide more light that they could share from the corridor space. The person who lives in this unit is a furniture remaker, seller. He has a great unit. This is one of the units that happens within the old office area that I mentioned, which meant that we needed to restore and keep in some of the old trim and molding and doors that supported the old office use. This was actually a waiting space adjacent to the Big Cheese's office. And the musician, who's actually moved out now, decided to light the unit that night primarily through candle use. This unit is on the southeastern corner. Painter, she's a little upset with us right now because she thinks there's too much light that floods the space. So it's upsetting her a little bit. But this unit has plaster that we restored. It has a wood structural system and also steel beams that run through it. Again, the character of that's incredible. Next. This is a messy unit. The importance of this image is that we were also told that if we didn't use vertical stairs or if stairs didn't work with our plan, that they had to remain. So this is a stair that remained in a unit. Of course, it's being well used. That's it.